Don't throw it back. Don't throw it back. I didn't throw it back, and now it's in my house. My name is Dale Hutchins, and I need you to listen because I don't have much time left before it finishes what it started. I've been sitting at my kitchen table for 6 hours with every light on and the Bible open to Psalms, reading verses about darkness and deep waters because that's where it lives, waiting for idiots like me to go out on that lake on a hot summer night, thinking we were alone. If you're the kind of person who goes night fishing alone, if you like that quiet and that feeling when it's just you and the water for miles, then you need to stop tonight and never go back out there again, because I made the mistake of thinking I knew that lake, and it cost me everything. I lost my wife Karen 4 years ago to a car accident, and after that, fishing was the only thing keeping me tethered to this earth. I'm telling you this because you need to know who I was before that night. Not a believer, not a churchgoer, just a man who thought the worst thing that could happen to me already had. I was wrong. God, I was so goddamn wrong. If you're reading this while the sun is going down outside your window, please, I'm begging you, go check your doors and windows and don't ever assume you're safe in your own home, because I made that same mistake and now I'm paying for it in ways I can't even describe without my hand shaking so hard I can barely type. I launched my 14-foot aluminum boat right at sundown on a Friday in late June, parked myself near the old fishing camp on the eastern shore of Lake Okeechobee, and cast out 3 lines like I always do when I need to drown out the silence in my head. The water was glass calm, not a breath of wind, and the kind of hot that makes your shirt stick to your chest the second you step outside. The kind of heat that Florida dumps on you every summer, like it's personally offended by your existence. I had my cheap radio playing old country songs low, a cooler full of Pabst Blue Ribbon within arm's reach, and everything felt right with the world for the first time in months. That's the state of mind I was in when my biggest rod, the one with the heavy sinker and the braided line, suddenly went rigid and started bending like it was about to snap in half. I thought I'd snagged a log, or maybe one of those old fence posts they talk about near the camp. But when I cranked the reel, the resistance felt wrong, thick and stubborn, like something was pushing back against me with actual intention, with actual need. The line groaned under the pressure, and I had to use both hands to turn the handle, leaning back in my seat until my boots scraped against the deck, my muscles burning as I fought against whatever was waiting down there in that black water. Lord, protect me from the snares of the wicked, I muttered without thinking. Some half-remembered prayer from my grandmother's funeral floating up from the depths of my memory, and it took me nearly 10 minutes to pull whatever it was up from what must have been 30 feet of darkness. And the whole time my heart was pounding because the weight wasn't moving like a fish or a waterlogged tree branch. It was just there, waiting for me to drag it to the surface like a sacrifice I didn't know I was making. When I finally saw it break the waterline, I let out a short laugh because I thought it was some kid's pool toy, or maybe an old milk jug, something stupid that had been floating there for years. But as I reached down to grab it with trembling hands, my fingers stopped inches away, and my whole body went cold, even though the temperature that night was pushing 90 degrees, and I was sweating so bad I could feel the drops rolling down my spine like ice water, like the touch of something dead. It was a camera, a waterproof digital camera in one of those orange floating cases, the kind they sell at Walmart for about $60, the kind my daughter Megan used to take on her snorkeling trips back when she was still talking to me. I pulled it out of the water and wiped it off with my shirt tail, and the first thing I noticed was that the battery indicator was still showing half a charge, which made no sense because this thing had been sitting on the bottom of that lake for God knows how long, wrapped in silt and darkness where electronics are supposed to die and never come back. I popped open the little rubber flap and stuck my thumb on the power switch, and the screen flickered to life with a soft chirping sound that cut through the silence like a scream. I scrolled through the menu, and that's when I saw it. There was only one video file saved on the card, and the timestamp said it had been recorded just 43 minutes before I caught it on my line. I stared at that little screen on my boat in the middle of that dark lake, and something in my gut twisted up like you wouldn't believe. "The Lord is my shepherd," I whispered, my lips barely moving. A prayer I hadn't spoken in 20 years, but I couldn't look away from those numbers burning themselves into my retinas. Now I need you to picture this, because the time is important. I launched my boat at 8:47 p.m., parked in my usual spot by 9:15, and sat there drinking my first beer while the sun melted into the horizon. I didn't cast a single line until 9:52 p.m. because I was savoring that sacred hour when the lake belonged only to me. The camera timestamp said the video was recorded at 9:57 p.m., 5 minutes after I started fishing, 5 minutes after I cast that heavy sinker into the black water. I sat there with my jaw hanging open, watching those seconds tick by, trying to make sense of how a camera that should have been buried in mud for years somehow recorded a video during the exact window when I was sitting alone in my boat. I hit play before I could talk myself out of it, before my survival instincts could override my curiosity, and the video started loading with a progress bar that seemed to take forever, each percentage point crawling across the screen like it was deliberately making me wait for whatever horror was about to unfold. The video started with the camera pointed at the bottom of a boat. I could see the aluminum floor with those little rubber traction pads you step on, and the edge of a red and white tackle box sitting in the corner where I'd left it that night, where I always leave it, positioned exactly where it always sits when I go fishing, because I'm a creature of habit, and I like my space arranged the same way every single time I climb into this metal coffin I call my sanctuary. The camera was sitting in one of those little mesh cup holders on the side of the boat, the kind that's meant for holding your phone while you text and drive or whatever, and the angle was looking right toward the back of the boat where I always sit with my feet propped up on the bench and my cooler within arm's reach like a security blanket full of cheap beer and broken dreams. I could see my own reflection in the lens housing, a pale smudge of a face that I almost didn't recognize because of the way the moonlight was hitting the water and reflecting up, casting these weird shadows across my features that made me look like a stranger, like someone who had already started to decay from the inside out. Even though I have not known thee, O Lord, as my God, I stammered, trying to find some anchor in the darkness of that lake, trying to remember any fragment of faith my grandmother had tried to plant in me before she passed. I have sought thee, and thou hast answered me. The audio was crystal clear. I could hear the cicadas singing in the trees along the shore, and the gentle lapping of water against the hull. The same sounds I was hearing right that very second on my own boat. The same night, the same moment, the same everything. And that's when I realized with bone-deep horror that I was listening to a recording of myself in real time. A ghost in a machine that shouldn't have existed. A message from 5 minutes in the past that was being delivered to me in the present, like a curse I had been mailing to myself all along. Then I heard my own voice on the recording, and I dropped that camera like it had bitten me. "You came back," my voice said, and it sounded tired and scared and a little bit angry, the way I sounded when I was talking to Karen near the end of our marriage, when we were just two strangers sharing a mortgage and a silence that stretched for miles between us. I had never said those words in my life. I would have remembered saying something that ominous, something that carried the weight of prophecy, like a promise made in blood. "I told you not to come back here," my voice continued, and the words were coming out of that tiny speaker, like they were being pulled from my throat by invisible strings, like I was a puppet, and something was using my own mouth to deliver a warning I didn't remember giving. "I told you what would happen if you came back." The camera stayed still for another 15 seconds after I finished talking, and I could hear my own breathing on the recording, ragged and panicked. The kind of breathing you do when you've just seen something that doesn't fit into your understanding of how the world works. That's when I noticed the second figure reflected in the lens. Not my reflection, but someone else standing behind where I would have been sitting. And I could feel my sanity starting to slip like a fishhook ripping through weak flesh as I watched that shadow move closer to the camera, closer to me, closer to the moment when everything I thought I knew about my life and my lake would shatter into 1,000 pieces I could never put back together again. I threw that camera back into the water without thinking. I grabbed it and hurled it as far as I could into the darkness, and I heard it plop somewhere out in the black where I couldn't see it anymore. Couldn't watch it float back to the surface like a message in a bottle sent from hell. My hands were shaking so bad I knocked over my beer, and I sat there in that moonlight trying to convince myself it was a prank, that one of the guys from the bait shop had set this up because I was the pathetic loner who came out here every Friday with nothing else going for me. But I couldn't explain how that camera ended up 30 feet down on the bottom of that lake. Couldn't explain the timestamp matching the exact moment I was fishing. Couldn't rationalize my own voice saying things I never said with a conviction that felt rehearsed, felt planned, felt like I had been mouthing those words in my sleep for years without knowing it. "Create in me a clean heart, O God," I whispered into the darkness, my voice cracking and barely audible over the sound of my terror, "and renew a right spirit within me, and cast me not away from thy presence." But I knew even as I spoke those ancient words that whatever was listening to me that night wasn't the God my grandmother taught me about in Sunday school, wasn't the loving Father who watched over broken men trying to find peace in a world that had stripped everything else away from them. I packed up and flew back to the launch ramp like a bat out of hell, and I didn't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time for the next 2 weeks, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face in the reflection. Those dead eyes staring at me through a lens that should have been nothing but silt and decay, at the bottom of a lake that suddenly felt like it was watching me back. Then, on the following Friday night, I did something stupid. I went back, because that's what we do as humans. That's the fatal flaw baked into our DNA. We go back to the places that hurt us because we convince ourselves that facing our fears will somehow make them less real, less powerful, less likely to destroy us when we're not looking. I told myself I just wanted to prove it was nothing, that I needed to get closure or whatever they call it on those daytime talk shows, that I was a rational man living in a rational world, and there had to be an explanation for what I saw that night that didn't involve ghosts or curses or things that lived in the water and waited for lonely men to come and disturb their rest. I launched the boat at the exact same time, parked in the exact same spot, and sat there in the dark with my radio off and my eyes scanning every inch of water around me, like I was expecting an invasion, like I was standing guard at the gates of hell, waiting for the demons to come pouring out. I didn't cast a single line because I was too paranoid to take my attention off the lake, too convinced that if I looked away for even a second, something would reach up and drag me down into the black where the sun never reached and the cold never stopped biting. And I sat there for almost 2 hours, listening to the silence and waiting for something to happen that I already knew in my bones was coming, whether I was ready or not. Right at 9:57 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize, and I stared at that screen with my heart lodged somewhere in my throat as I read 4 words that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my life and my safety, and the boundaries between the world I lived in and whatever world existed just beneath the surface of that lake. You came back again. I looked up from my phone, and that's when I noticed the ripples starting about 50 yards to my left, spreading out in perfect circles like something was moving just beneath the surface. And I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch as the disturbance headed straight for my boat with a purpose and a patience that told me it had all the time in the world to wait for me. All the time in the world to finally get what it had been reaching for since that first camera broke the surface of my water. I don't remember the drive home. They found my truck at the boat ramp 3 hours later, with the engine still running and the door hanging open. And I was sitting on the dock with my boots muddy and my hands clasped together, like I was praying, even though no words were coming out. Just sounds that didn't mean anything. The deputy said I kept asking what day it was, whether the lake was still there, if I had dreamed everything up in some fever. My mind had cooked to punish me for all those years I'd spent running from my feelings in cheap beer and solitude. I spent 3 days in the hospital because my heart wouldn't calm down, and the doctors thought I was having a breakdown, but I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw out on that water was as real as the ground beneath my feet. I went back to that lake one more time 2 months later, and I'm not going to tell you why, because some doors, once you open them, you can't close again, and once you see what's waiting on the other side, you can't unsee it no matter how hard you try. The camera showed up again last Tuesday, tangled in my line at 9:57 p.m. like clockwork, like it had been waiting for me to come back so it could deliver its next message. When I checked the screen, there was a new video. This one was recorded from inside my living room, filmed through the window while I was sitting at my kitchen table typing this story on my laptop. The timestamp was 10:03 p.m., 6 minutes after I caught the camera, and the audio captured my own fingers hitting the keyboard before I heard my own voice saying these exact words out loud as I wrote them. I looked up and saw a shape standing in my backyard 20 feet from the glass doors, wearing a long coat dripping water onto my grass, never moving, never blinking, just watching me with that patience I had come to know so well. It was saying goodbye. It was saying, see you soon. It was saying, there's nowhere you can go that I won't eventually find you. I'm telling you this because I need someone to know what I know now, about that lake and about the thing that lives in that water, waiting for people like me to come back again and again. If you ever catch something on your line while you're fishing alone at night, throw it back immediately without looking at it, without checking what's inside, without giving in to that curiosity that will eventually kill you if you let it. Whatever it is, just let it go back down to where it came from and go home and check your locks and your windows. Because it's not looking for the camera anymore. It found that a long time ago, and now it knows exactly where you are. I can hear something moving around in my house right now. Something heavy and wet dragging itself across my floors. And I think my time is almost up because I can smell the lake water, even though I'm 40 miles from the shore. If you're reading this, please don't throw it back.